Hi and welcome back to the channel. People like making lists, so I'm gonna make some lists. Top 25 movies from the 1980s. Oh my god, this is so difficult. And mainly difficult because the 1980s, when you think of like a genre, for me, for somebody that's as old as I am, 40 odds, mid 40s, you're caught between that thing of nostalgia, the films that you loved and adored as a kid, and the films that you've come to appreciate when you've got a bit older in life, and kind of trying to sort that mess out is tough. So I've done as good a job as I could do of it while still being truthful. So there's a whole list of movies that I thought, God, that'd be a cool one to put in the list. It just didn't make it. 25 is not enough. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Anyway, number 25 I'm going to start with The Empire Strikes Back. You may have heard of it. I think I may have put this in more as a nod to the nostalgic part of my brain. The Empire Strikes Back is easily the best of the three movies, I think, in terms of, intrigue, suspense, all of that kind of stuff, and especially in building on what was A New Hope and kind of introducing a lot of new elements to the world and a lot of threat and kind of setting up. Most of us love films that set up events to come, especially when you've seen the resolution of what's to come. Then you go back to the bit, well, if it wasn't for the setup, we wouldn't have been there. And plus, sure, it has great ending, etc. And it does take me right back. So, Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars 5. Been trying to explain that to my children recently about why, 4, 5, 6 came out first, etc. They still look at me quizzically. 24. Something that's a bit more recent watching, but obviously these films for these. I'm going to go for Society. And Society probably isn't a great film, but it is like a completely disgusting body horror. The scene at the end is really, truly one of the most vomit-inducing scenes that I can think of in movies. But there's something about it I really like. It has very much that kitschy feel of the 1980s all over it. And this kind of story of trying to grow up and people, around you not seeming who they appear to be as you go up and try and make sense of the world really resonates with me. So 24 is Society. 23, I have sort of a cheat of two in here. I mean, it's probably really Ghostbusters in here. I do love Ghostbusters. I think it's really funny. In fact, the 80s, if you contrast that to my 90s list, is there's much more comedy in it. But I'm also going to throw in Mr. Vampire here because I've seen that recently, and both are kind of like comedies within the paranormal universe. So I'm taking 2 for 1 here. Ghostbusters is the better movie, but Mr. Vampire, I just think it's extraordinarily funny and great. So 26 if you want. 22 is my 20th century, a film I've talked an awful lot about in second run. I just think it's a great story of the divergent paths that life can take of two twins that are split up at an early age and how they end up doing very different things in life before coming back and meeting up later in their life. I think it's a terrific watch and something that should have set Dico and Yeti on a road to stardom, but doesn't like making that many movies, but the ones that she does make are terrific. 21. So I have a couple of these types of movies on here, and I will tell you now, Gregory's Girl is not on here. I dare say Gregory's Girl used to be on this, but I've seen Local Hero, which is 21, more recently, and it's kind of resonated. I've seen it a couple of times now. It's one of those things I tried to see for ages, kind of rented it, kind of got a copy from Criterion, and then it's been on the TV all the time ever since I've seen it from then. And Burt Lancaster and that very Bill Forsyth style of humour is something that really resonates with me. And like I say, I fully expect once the new release of Gregory's Girl comes out, it's a film that I just think is utterly hilarious, and I expect that would kind of reappear if I'd seen it more recently. But there you go. 20 is one of the most upsetting films I've ever seen. Is George Sleezer's The Vanishing, the story of a girl that goes missing and the attempts by her partner to find her. Jesus, it's grim, but it's amazing. But it does have, it's grim. Not for what even it shows in Scream. Like if I think about Society, like that's something you can't look at. This is just when you think about it and you go, oh god, that is grim. Anyway, we'll keep moving on through these. Number 19, Abbas Kiarostami's Where's the Friend's House, a film that's sort of about nothing. A young boy comes home from school and it's his friend's homework, and he thinks, shit, my friend's gonna get in big trouble if he can't do his homework tonight. And he goes by himself pretty much to go and try and find this kid's house so they can give him his homework back. It's so powerful, so moving, and just shows you the power of filmmaking in its broadest sense, in terms of telling empathetic stories about very menial and maybe inconsequential things. Number 18 is a film I talked about recently, is The Wonderful Malcolm, the Australian film of the man who is neurodivergent, living by himself. Everybody worries about him, and he shacks up with people who maybe are not the most wholesome characters in the world, but is sort of lovable at the same time. It's a real treat, another sort of comedic film that's very playful and is just a very, very light watch. And I think a lot of what you'll see in my list here actually kind of represents that in some way. 17 is one of my former favourite films. I remember watching this with my dad. Being the first film that ever made me cry. I'm talking about Glory, the American Civil War epic about the story of the troop of black soldiers who want to fight in the Civil War, and how impactful that entire epic film is, and especially the ending got on me. Brilliant film. 16, The Goonies. Don't really need to say too much about The Goonies. If you grew up in an era like myself, The Goonies was very much what we wanted Monday to Friday to be on screen. You know, that kind of adventure. You find a map, you kind of, oh my god, this adventure's going, there's a bit of danger, but not too much danger. Oh, brilliant escapism film. 15, maybe a questionable one, Tootsie. Sidney Pollock's Tootsie. There's just something about Tootsie I love. And some ways it's a film that shouldn't work. Dustin Hoffman dressing up in a female get up to try and get a role, kind of showing the reverse of, you know, sexism, you know, in some ways, how women couldn't get the roles, etc. in life, and were often marginalised and, you know, worse paid off than their counterparts, and yet in the other way around. It's a bit preachy in that way, but it's still a comedy. It's still a lot of fun and pokes fun at a lot of the ridiculousness of Hollywood and celebrity, if you want to say that. 14, this is probably an unpopular opinion, but The Fog. I love The Fog. Bar one, which is coming up later, it's my favourite Carpenter film. I love the brooding atmosphere. I love the kind of very subtle use of special effects in it. I love the storytelling in it, but there's like a dread and a fear in it. It's a great example of what you don't see often is what's more frightening than what you do see. 13, Karate Kid. Talked about this a while ago. It's longer than I remember it, but it's still an awful lot of fun. Pure escapism. It's one of those films I can't separate my past feelings about from my current ones. It's just all wrapped in one. It's very much a core of the sense of who I am. 12, Restless Natives. Not Bill Forsyth, but sort of Bill Forsyth-esque. Again, comedic, very British, well, in this case, Scottish humour. Of these two fellas that decide that they're just bored and kind of want to hold up tourist buses, and completely comedic and so charming. Charm fest from start to finish. I love it. 11, Blowout, De Palma. Possibly De Palma's best film. The use of John Travolta in the role where he uses sound to solve a murder. It's brilliant, great ending, great fantastic climax. John Lithgow was terrific in it. Nancy Allen's brilliant. John Travolta's brilliant. It's just so well put together. I don't think there's hardly a wasted scene in the film. Absolutely tremendous. Number 10, Tampopo by Mr. Tammy. One of the first Criterion films that I ever seen and went, oh my god, I wouldn't have seen that any other way. It has some of those weird food fetish stuff in between, but this ramen western, again, purely charming, great storytelling throughout, and sort of has a lightness and a gaiety that is very representative of the 80s in general. Number 9, something that's not like any of those things, is Ken Russell's Altered States. An absolute mind trip of a film, but absolutely brilliant. You know, try to push special effects and use them in a way that sort of doesn't age well, but ages brilliantly in some ways, because it sort of represents this guy who's trying to connect with a more primal version of himself by putting himself into those kind of isolation tanks, etc. Just William Hurt, brilliant movie. One of these days we'll get a really great release and people will fawn over it wildly. At number 8, a film, probably the film I've seen more than any other. I had two sisters primarily, but as it turns out, I really love the movie as well. I watched it again recently just to make sure that I still love it. It's Dirty Dancing is the one that I'm talking about. Jennifer Grey, Patrick Swayze. You know, I can't separate the memories from the movie, but it's a fun movie. And, you know, who hasn't seen or wanted the act out part of the last scene of the movie in some time you've been out drunk or something? 7, I'm going to put in The Fly. Again, body horror seems to be a thing that I've grown to like an awful lot more as I've got older. Again, this Fly's a horror, but it's really a romance. It kind of messes these two things together. And again, I'm now tied with the memory of watching this with my eldest recently, where she was so repulsed and disgusted by the transformation scene that it just, every time I think of it, I'll just roar out laughing in my head. Just great fun that way. Number 6, getting to the serious films now. 6 is Ran, Kurosawa's Ran. Again, talking about big epic films and filmmaking. Ran, story of a man who's an emperor's dying, who's worried about his kingdom falling apart, does fall apart, etc. as he divides it up. It's epic in scale. The use of colour, etc. is just the way Kurosawa as a filmmaker and as a storyteller can do. There's an epic feel to it, but there's also a sort of very close-knit feeling between the audience and the viewer as to how far away you are from it. You're not from it from a distance at it, you're right up close with it, and it's just terrific in that way. Number 5, Blade Runner. May have heard of it. Blade Runner is just transformative in the history of cinema. I think still most films struggle to create an atmosphere, even with all the money in the world, that Blade Runner does sort of effortlessly. Back in the days when that was what Ridley Scott's calling card was, and in a lot of ways giving him more money removes some of the need to create a more authentic feel sometimes. But Blade Runner, what a book. The book's not the film, but also what a film. Number 4, Cinema Paradiso. I know my good friend Charlie Ronan isn't his favourite version, isn't favourite film by the filmmaker. Cinema Paradiso just speaks to everything about the reasons that I love films, or the kind of playfulness and the relationships that it brings and uses with other people, and how that all wraps into one to kind of create like a lifelong need and love of film itself. It's so charming. It's like a big warm hug every time I watch it, and just terrific. Number 3, a big hug to stop me from retching is it's the John Carpenter's The Thing. For me, just quintessentially should be a more popular film than it is. I get why it's not. I mean, the transformation scenes, the dogs, etc. My wife's never sitting through that ever. Never happened. My kids can barely do it. But The Thing's brilliant. That suspense, whodunit aspect of it, and the blood sampling scene. Few scenes in cinema that are like that. Number 2, big family favourite, Neighbour Totoro, Ghibli movie. Could have had another couple of Ghibli movies on here. Kiki's Delivery Service, etc. would have been very high up. The representation of the young kids are my kids. The representation of those kids trying to deal with the trauma of their mum being there, not being well, etc. It's just, again, warm hug time in a way that Ghibli only can really do that well compared to everybody else. Just wonderful. And number 1 for me, fairly easy. In the conversation of on certain days, what's your favourite film of all time, I might say Wim Wenders' Paris, Texas. Paris, Texas, again, is a film sort of about nothing. The guy returning home, talking about and trying to connect with his ex-wife and his life and his family and his brother. And there's just something otherworldly about Paris, Texas. Part of it is the setting in which it's shot in. Part of it is the way that it's shot. Part of it is the acting performances. Part of it is just that magic sprinkling you get when you put all those things together in a perfect way. You get Paris, Texas. And that's my top 25 list. I'm sure I've forgotten something loads. Oh yeah, I should say, if I was counting it, and I wasn't, Decalogue, probably number 2. Does that help? I may do a follow-up video of things that I can't believe it's not in my top 25. Because maybe that list's more interesting than this one. I don't know. Let me know what your top films are of the 80s in the comments. the ones you can't believe are so high on my list, etc., you can let me know, and I'll speak to you again soon on the channel. Take care. All the best. Bye.